Welcome back to another episode of the Stop and Pop. I have a guest here with me today, Josh Gordon, who is a Wizards fan. So we're going to be discussing the Wizards on this episode. How you doing, Josh?
I'm okay. It's nice to be here.
That's good. That's good. So I'm gonna get started. How long have you been a Wizards fan, and where does the fandom come from?
Well, I've been a fan slash season ticket holder since 2013.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in DC since 2001. I grew up in Florida. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't have any NBA basketball teams when I was a kid. I'm pretty old. So I was like a Bulls fan during the 80s. My
Mm-hmm.
dad was a 76ers fan because he grew up in Philly. And then I was into football because all we had were the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they sucked most of the time I was growing up.
Yeah.
So the Bulls were pretty aspirational. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but then I kind of was more into college basketball. I went to University of Florida for grad school and was a Gator fan my whole life. So anyway, that took me to
Mm-hmm.
2012, 2013. I had kids. I was living in Washington. Bradley Beal was a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
And John Wall, I knew how great he was from watching Florida play Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
So I took my family to a game in the 2012-2013 season. We had a good time, so I decided to just get season tickets. And
Mm-hmm.
really, from then until now, I've probably seen 90% of all of Wizards games home and away.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Um, we only go to about 13 to 15 a season,
Mm-hmm.
but we watch the rest on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Although this year it's been a bit harder to watch, but maybe we'll
Oh,
get into some of that in a little
yeah,
bit.
definitely. So the next thing I want to ask you, since you've been watching them since 2012, do you have any special memories that you have with the Wizards? Maybe like a playoff run or a certain player that you really connect with?
Yeah, those first few years as a season ticket holder were when Wall and Beal were sort of up and coming. We made the
Mhm.
playoffs our first year as season ticket holders. We beat the Bulls in that first series, and I guess that was like 2013, 2014,
Mhm.
which was like a surprise. And then obviously leading to the 2016-17 season and the Celtics 7 game series.
That was a
Um,
great
so,
series. Mhm.
in terms of like actual uh, things that stand out, I think the weird thing about being a Wizard season ticket holder is that even during what was relatively great success during the Wall and Beal era, even though they never won 50 games, they never went to a conference championship. Um,
Mhm.
like the crowds were never too big. So like the things I enjoyed were taking my kids to Wizards games, seeing pretty high quality basketball, not having to fight the crowds. Like there were some snow days where we went and there were maybe 2,000 people in the arena.
Mhm.
And like it was just so relaxing, but also enjoyable because the
Mhm.
team was pretty likable. Um, but then you have a couple like the 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 thing that I always say is my favorite Wizards memory of modern era is the 17 to 0 run against the Celtics in that 2017 playoffs where we scored
Mhm.
17 straight and um, people were just going bonkers in the
Mhm.
stands because we had never seen a Wizards team do that well. It was really kind of
Mhm.
an amazing thing. And I think that actually stands out to me more than the John Wall made three in some ways, because that was more like a we might actually do it kind of time where
Yeah.
even the John Wall game 6 three at the end, we knew we still had to go back to Boston. We never really played well there and kind of I didn't really have my hopes that high, but when we like had that run and I think that was like game 2 or game 3, I guess. It was amazing that run.
Mhm. Yeah, that was a great playoff run. I remember saying how that was just. I thought the Wizards was going to beat the Celtics that series. I really believed that, and John Wall was just out of his mind that whole playoff run. And I felt like if maybe they had like one more piece, they could have went to the finals. That's my honest opinion about it. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing about the Wizards that there were always fatal flaws because of just stupid decision making.
Hmm.
And I think that 2016-17 team, the way they managed just the playing time for Brad and John during the playoffs, even from game one, was just torture because we knew those guys were getting tired by the end. The coach didn't seem to know what to do about it. They just
Hmm.
leaned on them. They didn't have that extra piece. And it was just such a wasted opportunity, especially now when you look back at that. That was really John's last time being healthy. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. And honestly, I miss John Wall being in a Wizards uniform. I thought they was going to try to bring him back last year. I was hoping for it, even written a few articles about it, but it never panned out to being that way.
Yeah, I think what people don't realize, like John Wall clearly had flaws and wound up being hurt a lot, which
Hmm.
isn't his fault. But his when he was feeling good on the court, he really, I think, had the city in his hands. Like, I mean, we there was like a deep, I think, connection with Wall that I don't think Brad ever had. Um, maybe Gilbert had it. Um, I didn't go to a ton of those games or watch the team as much, but there was just something when John Wall was on, the crowd was with him, and we kind of would like ride or die with the guy, and it's sad that it all kind of fell apart.
Yeah, unfortunately. The next question I wanted to ask you was that with the news that the Wizards may potentially move to Virginia from Capital One Arena, how do you feel about that?
I mean, it's devastating. Like
Hmm.
the day after I heard, I felt like a family member had died, which
Hmm.
I know is like it's such hyperbole, but um, it really it's still upsetting. Like I still can't even wrap my head around it. And I think part of it is that, well, one, I love DC. I love living here. My whole life I wanted to live here. Um,
Hmm.
and so I really care for the city itself and how the city is doing and how that neighborhood is doing. My wife works in that neighborhood, so once my kids go off to college, we just figured we would meet after work and go to games and like
Hmm.
um, that would be the normal course of things, and this just throws that all out the window.
Yeah.
And like to come now after Leonsis finally committed to a rebuild in the way that most teams do a rebuild, and it seemed like he finally had a decent structure for basketball operations, and
Hmm.
so it was something to look forward to. And now, like, I have a hard time looking forward to it because if it happens, it's not going to be in my city and in
Hmm.
the place where I want to go. And so I'm really devastated. I'm very torn about whether to renew my season tickets, even though they're not moving for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Who knows? But I
Hmm.
just like to give him money. It makes me so distressed uh,
Yeah.
because I just think he's abandoning the city. And everything
Hmm.
he's done until now was just a bunch of BS. This like
Hmm.
for the district hashtag and the cherry blossoms and the new boundary stone stuff and all of that. It was all like fake and it's really really upsetting and disappointing and yeah. So I have not made peace with it and I'm not sure I ever will.
Yeah, I completely understand. Like I'm living here in Maryland, but I'm right across the street. I'm in DC, and I'm able to easily go to Wizards games. So I feel like it's really accessible to get there. A lot of people don't want the Wizards to move to Virginia because it's a further commute, and they feel like the Wizards have been a staple in their community for so long, and for them to just try to rip it away from them, it's not fair at all.
Yeah,
For me, it's like like I get it. It's I was reading some things about how like the rent there is really high and things like that. Well, you can make negotiations to change that, but don't just full on leave. Even Bradley Bill made a video talking about how he needs the Wizards to stay in DC because it feels like it's part of the community. You have to keep them there.
yeah. I mean, I think you know, I I understand it's a business, but it really, in the modern era, when people aren't watching TV as much and like the to be a fan of a team is actually becoming less relevant than usual. Now, younger generations are fans of players. They watch TikTok highlights or snippet highlights on Twitter or wherever, and the fan experience of being dedicated to a team is becoming kind of old school. And
Mm-hmm.
I think for the Wizards, this just furthers that along to where it has no meaning. Like being the Washington Wizards, it is just not going to have very much meaning in the modern era if they're playing in Potomac Yard in Arlington. Um,
Yeah.
and and I think you know people say, well, he's a businessman, he wants to make money, but owning these teams is really not the same thing as owning a business where you're trying to maximize value for your shareholders. It's
Mm-hmm.
a different kind of thing. It depends on a two-way, almost illogical devotion, and that's why this kind of action just throws that into sharp relief. And honestly, I think over the long term, I'm not sure it's going to be a money making proposition relative to getting half as much public money to rebuild in DC versus twice as much to build somewhere new and have this sort of fake real estate venture. But it's not going to have the emotional connection and passion. And so, is it going to get more people interested in watching Wizards games or going to Wizards games over the long term? I'm not sure. I have a hard time seeing how that would actually be the case. Everyone always compares it to Golden State, but Golden State went through a period of 10 years where they were the best basketball team in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
like, so that engendered a passion that spread across the Bay in San Francisco. But I just don't see how that's going to happen for the Wizards. So, like, what are they going to sell the team on to fans? It's just hard to see the future. But maybe that's just me wish casting, and maybe he has a whole business plan. But I'm not going to be a part of it.
Yeah, I understand. Well, speaking of one of the things that they're trying to sell us, the rebuild, how do you feel about it so far? And looking at it now, how do you feel about the Jordan Poole trade that the Wizards made?
I mean, I think again, I'm torn because I watch all of these games,
Mm-hmm.
and you say to yourself, well, we're going to lose. We're supposed to be bad. We don't have the personnel. But then, you sit in your seats at Capital One Arena and you cheer for every three-pointer and you're like invested in them winning for some reason. It's just like a natural emotion. So certainly it's a little bit painful what's happening. But in a rebuild, your number one goal, I think, is probably to just lose.
Mm-hmm.
However you can get there, right? Because you just need to build up the draft choices to hopefully hit on something. So, like the Poole trade, it was probably worth doing. Obviously, it looks horrible in retrospect. You wonder how much due diligence they did to figure out like what the problems were going to be with Jordan Poole, what the possibilities were, what the potential was. I assume they did a little bit of research and maybe they're a little bit surprised at how little kind of room for growth maybe it seems like there's been with him. Um, but in general, because of the way the salary cap is structured now, you have to pay someone money. You can't just skimp on salaries.
Mm-hmm.
So they're paying people money. They're losing games like they're supposed to. Uh, they're still like have only the third best lottery odds, even with how bad they've been.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's just uglier, I think, than maybe it should be. And I think maybe that's partly because they have people that have been on championship teams that are playing for this team, like Kuzma and Poole. And so maybe you expected there to be a little bit more sense of professionalism, dedication, which they clearly don't have right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was one of those people who thought Jordan Poole was really gonna take off on his own team. So far he's just been really inconsistent with his play. To me, I'm really surprised at how it's been for him because when he was on the Warriors, he shown flashes that he could be that guy. And the Warriors are very adamant of saying how he won a playoff series for them. So I'm just like, where is all of this that he had in Golden State? Where is it now? And I honestly feel like it might be due to maybe himself, but also the coaching staff not putting him in the right position to succeed. So the next question I wanted to ask you about that: how do you feel about Wes Unseld as a coach?
I mean, I'm not too happy uh with him as a coach. I mean, um again, the Wizards always seem to be in this position where we have coaches that are um not great, not the worst in the world, but then they also don't have the personnel to make any sense of their vision work on the court.
Mm-hmm.
So Scotty Brooks obviously was a decent coach for OKC. He came here, he had some successes, some failures, but we clearly didn't maximize our personnel choices to help him succeed. And I think the same thing can be said for Randy Whitman. The same thing can be said for Wes. But ultimately, the what you would want to see in a rebuild at this point, and you and I think we're talking about this on threads a little bit. Like I would just completely change up how they divvy up playing time at this point. And Bilal is the most important player on the team, and I just don't know why we're not doing more to facilitate his rise. Again, I'm not a personnel expert. I don't know what's happening in practice, but I just think the thought that he's just going to stand in the corner as a 3 and D person, I just don't know why we're limiting him to that at this point because we're not winning. No one is playing well in the starting lineup, really, although maybe Denny is playing slightly okay. Tyus had a great December, but I don't know. Something is wrong because no one is actually trying on that team. Um, so I would not be afraid to make changes, and I'm not quite sure why we're so set in our ways. Who starts, who comes out at what minutes? Like everything seems very structured for a team where you would think we'd be throwing stuff at the wall to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I feel like the rotations are a little questionable. Um, I do feel like Bilal should be getting a lot more minutes than he is because he's shown that he can score, he can do a lot of things on the court with consistent minutes. It was the other game where he had about 3 blocks, and I'm just like, yeah, that defensive ability. That's why we need him to play more minutes because he's shown that he can be a defensive anchor even at such a young age. So honestly, when he first came in, I didn't know who he was when you first drafted him, so I had to do my own research on him. And I was like, okay, like, I see where they're trying to go with him, and they're going to build him up as this defensive player. Um, I see a lot of things that he can do in transition and also off the pick and roll. And I was like, okay, so maybe down the line he could be a little bit of a facilitator. So I feel like he should be a starter on this team, honestly.
Yeah, why? I mean, why not? What's the argument for not starting them? I just they're horrible defensively. So even if you say his offense isn't there yet, why he's one of your 5 best defensive players? So why isn't he starting? I just don't get it.
Mm-hmm. So the next one I wanted to ask you about was ultimately now that Bradley Bill is gone, we can look at the contract that he got, all that money and the no trade clause. When that happened, what was your initial reaction?
I mean, it's almost still an open wound that I can't believe how it went. I just can't believe they did that with him. All of it. I mean, I was when I was thinking about some of the things we were going to say, and they let him hold the team hostage for 4 years before they even did this max deal with the no trade clause, which just further held them hostage. And um, I just can't believe they let it happen. There was no reason to. He would have re-signed here for that amount of money without the no trade clause. I just don't understand it. It's just so inexplicable. And So these guys that are here now, Winger and Dawkins, when they were with OKC, and you can see how great OKC is doing, they partly got lucky, but also traded their stars for enough bites at the apple that they could build up this team. And I just I can't believe we lost that opportunity with Brad. Um, and we lost it many times over his time here. I it seems like maybe we were going to trade him to Philly, um, and then he hurt his wrist, and then that was off, and that would have given us the kind of haul that could have jump started a reset here. But it's just so unexplainable what happened, and when you look at the drafts, even when Brad was making us good enough to be mediocre, drafting ninth to 13th, the personnel decisions there, Tyrese Halliburton 1 year, Shangoon the next year. I mean, like we could already have been on our way towards rebuilding. And at every step of the way, Tommy Shepard made the wrong decision. And to think that someone would come in after Ernie Grunfeld and be even worse is it's just unbelievable. I mean, I just can't believe it happened. You would have thought that at least any new blood would have come in and given us a better shot, and they handled everything wrong, everything. So um, Brad was a joy to watch while he was here, especially during his younger years. But and he was a great guy. Um, but I mean, I just can't believe they did it with him. I can't believe they did that for all the wrong reasons, really.
Yeah, I was I had an ongoing debate with one of my friends about it when it happened, and I understood the money part, the no trade clause part. I didn't understand at all because only a few players who's actually had that throughout NBA history, and that was my only thing about it. I was like, why give him a no trade clause? Like, eventually you're gonna have to trade him if you're constantly losing. He's worth all this money. Eventually, you're gonna have to see what it's worth in the market. So for them to have that no trade clause, I feel like it really did hinder them. Um, I know a lot of Wizards fans that I've talked to personally said they did not like it at all, and that they should have been traded him a long time ago when they traded Wall. Um, so as the Wizards are now 6-29, how do you feel about the season so far? Where in the direction? Because I feel like it's no real direction so far. I feel like they just kind of just try to throw pieces together and we're gonna figure out along the way.
I mean, I think there is some element of that they've just thrown pieces together, and after the trade deadline, we'll see where things stand. And I mean, I think it's fine. I you know, a rebuild takes some time. There is some amount of patience that like us as fans have to have, and so I'm pretty fine with it. Do I wish Bilal was playing more? Sure, but there's not really anything else I would quibble with. They obviously put the team together in a really haphazard way because they were hamstrung with what they could do. I mean, I think if they could do it all over again, I can't imagine Gafford would be the only center who actually could play NBA minutes. Um, but it is what it is, and it'll take a few years to straighten out. But this is where the moving part comes in because, like, before you could be patient because you were looking forward to the future, and now we're being patient for them to just be ripped across the river and kind of abandon us. So it feels differently now. I think you and I agreed to do this about a week before the announcement of them moving. And so, like, it was going to be a happy discussion, I think, of the rebuild, and now it's turned into like an awaiting impending doom discussion. Um, so I don't know. I mean, it's fine. I just can't wait to get to the trade deadline and then see what happens in the draft. And really, it seems like next year's draft is more important than this year's draft. And you just wish maybe they would have started tanking a year earlier with the historic draft last year. And even then, we still came, I guess, within a 50% chance of drafting number one because of the ping pong balls. So, I mean, we'll see. Like, again, I'm willing to be patient. I'm just now I have to be angry at ownership and the organization for yet another reason.
Totally understand. I feel like they haven't maximized their draft picks yet. I mean, I feel like Johnny Davis should get more minutes as well because he was your lottery pick. Why you're not playing him at this point? He's shown slight improvement in the minutes that he's scarcely gotten. So might as well play him and Bilal together at some point. But I don't know. Like same thing you said. I'm not a personnel, so I don't know what's going on behind closed doors.
But I mean, anyone would look at it and say it doesn't make sense. I mean, it just doesn't. Like, he's on the team. They haven't cut him, they haven't traded him. So, like, see what you have. Play the guy. Like,
He's
who
not
are you
playing
hurting by not playing
right
him?
now either. But like I went to a G League game for the Go Go and he wasn't there. So it's like, when is he going to be able to get this developmental stuff down? Because you're not giving him any time to do it.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. It's yet another thing that um, is hard to understand. But again, like, you just I think it's impossible to be a Wizards fan still and not actually believe in what Michael Winger and Will Dawkins are doing. So I'm just going to trust in them because otherwise, like, I mean, what's left? Like, there's nothing left to believe in on the team if you don't at least trust the people that are doing the rebuild. And since they've only been here for 9 months or whatever it's been, you just have to believe that they know what they're doing and eventually things will work out.
Yeah, hopefully, maybe one day we can go to a Wizards game together and we can actually cheer for some winning basketball.
Or even like better losing, I would settle for.
Either one, either one. I want to thank you for being on my podcast, Josh. It was a pleasure talking to you about the Wizards. Unfortunately, they've been really bad, especially last night. But hopefully, we'll pray for better days.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. It's fun to get things off my chest.
No problem.
All
All
right.
right, have a good one.
Talk to you.